In our last few examples, we have been solving equations of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. It has taken us quite a while to do each example, and it's taken a lot of steps. But notice that every time we do it, the steps that we take are just about the same. So let's try to do it for general numbers a, b, and c so that we don't have to do these steps every time. The first thing that we did was write this in the form a times x minus h squared plus k. Please click the link now to see how we can write it in this form. It was very messy, but we found that we can write ax squared plus bx plus c as a times x minus negative b over 2a squared plus 4ac minus b squared all over 4a. Now to solve for x in a times x minus negative b over 2a squared plus 4ac minus b squared over 4a equals 0, we have to undo 4 operations. They're just messier than they were before. But first thing we do to x is we subtract negative b over 2a. The next thing we do is square it. After that we multiply by a. And finally we add the number 4ac minus b squared all over 4a. As we have done when we knew the numbers a, b, and c, we want to undo these in the opposite order. So to undo adding 4ac minus b squared over 4a, we subtract that number. And to undo multiplying by a, we divide by a. Undo squaring, we take the square root. And to undo subtracting negative b over 2a, we add negative b over 2a. So let's start by subtracting 4ac minus b squared over 4a from both sides. This will give us a times x minus negative b over 2a squared plus 4ac minus b squared over 4a minus 4ac minus b squared over 4a equals 0 minus 4ac minus b squared over 4a. We can simplify the right a bit by distributing that negative sign, making negative b squared positive b squared and 4ac negative 4ac. And on the left, we have that these two numbers cancel out because one is positive and one is negative no matter how messy they are. So on the left, we have a times x minus negative b over 2a all squared. The next thing we have to do is divide by a on both sides. This gives us a over x minus negative b over 2a all squared divided by a equals 1 over a, this is another way we can divide by a, times b squared minus 4ac all over 4a. On the right, a times 4a in the denominator is 4a squared, while in the numerator we're just multiplying by 1, so we have b squared minus 4ac still. And on the left, a divided by a is 1, so we have x minus negative b over 2a all squared. Now we need to take the square root of both sides. Doing that gives the square root of x minus negative b over 2a squared equals the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. But if we take the square root of a fraction, we can take the square root of the top and take the square root of the bottom separately. In the top we have the square root of b squared minus 4ac, while in the bottom we have the square root of 4 times a squared. But we can reduce that because the square root of 4 is 2 and the square root of a squared is a. So we have the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But on the left we have the square root of x minus negative b over 2a all squared, which is the absolute value of x minus negative b over 2a. So we have that the absolute value of x minus negative b over 2a equals the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But addressing the absolute value, we get that x minus negative b over 2a, the number inside the absolute value, has to either be plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And finally, to get just x, we need to add negative b over 2a to both sides. This gives x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And since these have a common denominator of 2a, we can combine the tops to get that x is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This means that no matter what a, b, and c are, we can solve for x without doing all the steps that we've been doing, but simply using this formula. So in trying to find the solutions to ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, we found that the solutions are given by x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This formula for solving quadratic equations with 0 on one side has a famous name. This is called the quadratic formula. And using this, we can now compute solutions to every quadratic equation very quickly, much quicker than we could before. So while it was very hard to come up with this, it'll help us in the long run.